today, guys, to the Fixed Roof Coupe channel. Chris here. So today we're going to go over some issues we're having with the old car. So after I drove it to the Whitewall Rama and got home, I noticed there was a pretty decent size coolant puddle underneath it. Now I had been leaking coolant before, little amounts, like, you know, yay. Now I had a pretty decent size puddle underneath the car. I'd say probably the size of my hand or so. And I was like, oh, I thought it was the radiator for the longest time, and it's not. Turns out it's the freeze plug, I believe, behind the engine mount on the driver's side. Look at the engine mount, you'll see like the fresh green dripping down. So I'm gonna go on that's the culprit. Around the freeze plug on the driver's side, it's just caked on grease. I mean, that could be just from normal wear, from small blocks leaking and things building up, but I think it's actually coolant. I could see a little bit of shiny greenness on the freeze plug, so I grabbed an 1 5/8" rubber freeze plug. It's just a plug. You put it in, you tighten this bolt down, this nut down, and it compresses that and squeezes and fits. I talked to a few people. A guy that I worked with when he was working at a shop on a regular basis said he used to put them in all the time, and they hold. I've read online that they hold. I read online that they don't hold. One guy said, oh, I had one blow out on hard acceleration in my car. Well, I don't do that in this, number one. Number two, it's going to be behind the engine mount, so it really can't blow out. I mean, it might have this much room to push out, which could be enough for a leak. I mean, we'll go down that road when we go there. If I have enough room to get a traditional one in, I'm going to try, but between the engine mount and the plate on the frame and the cross member, there's like maybe 4 inches. So I think it's going to be a pain in the butt to even get the actual freeze plug out. So I don't think I'm going to be able to tap one back in. I mean, I can always make some plate that bolts on to the engine mount, bolts and tightens. I don't know. We'll figure it out when we get down to that road. But I'm going to go to the parts store or see if one of my friends has a pressure tester, get some pressure in this thing, and get started. One more thing, my master cylinder is leaking back here, which is dripping onto my power steering box, which I thought was still leaking, and the box isn't. The pressure line, where this was like one that somebody had made, where all these fittings are put together, they're all leaking. So what I did was I purchased the proper pressure line for a 69 Camaro, which is this one that actually goes underneath the subframe, goes underneath the motor, and then comes into the back of the pump. So, I mean, while I'm in here doing all this, I might as well swap that out too. And get the car to, I'm taking it on 2 big car shows coming up. One of them's about an hour and 10 minutes from my house there, and then an hour and 10 back. And then we want to go to this place called the Rat's Nest, which is in New York. It's East Durham, New York, which is about almost 2 hours from me. It's like an hour and 50 minutes. And that's taking the highway. If I do it the back way, like on the back roads, it's like 2.5, almost 3 hours. So I want to really make sure that this car is ready to go for a long distance, because you can't trailer them there, man. If you're going to go to a rat rod show or the kind of those hot rod shows where, you know, you take a car, you got to drive it there. I personally think that's just my take on it. So I want to get it to where this thing's kind of driving smooth and going good, and the brakes aren't leaking, or I lose brakes, or power steering goes or something again. Like, I want to get it kind of where it needs to be. So I got the next few days off. I'm going to do some tinkering with it and try to get it to where it needs to be. So course of action is I'm going to take my brake lines off the master, pull the master. To get to the engine mounts, I have enough room, I think, to jack the motor up without it hitting the distributor cap into the tranny tunnel. There's plenty of room underneath the transmission to jack it up. So what I'm thinking is I'll unbolt the engine mount on here, get this out of the way because this valve cover's pretty close to that. Get a block of wood underneath there, jack the motor up just a little bit, just to get some wrenches in there, pull the engine mount off, and then I'll pull the frame mount off for the motor mount. And that should give me enough room, in theory, to get into this area here. I saw videos of guys pulling the header off to get to it. If I have to go down that road, I will. Complete pain in the you-know-what. That motor mount didn't even have a bolt in the front bolts. I found that one right there, just hanging out on the bottom there. So we'll have to wiggle that guy back in there. The driver's side engine mount is completely out. Essentially, I just have a floor jack and an old 6x6 holding. So there is the leak. It's a culprit. 100% is that freeze plug leaking. I wiped that down and cleaned it before I left. I just went to go get a pressure tester just to check and put some pressure to it, to just double check to make sure it is leaking. And then I kind of want to pressurize it to see if the other side is leaking behind the motor mount, because that one's going to be a pain in the you-know-what to get out too. So might as well just get it done now. At least this one. Tester hooked up, as Grace calls it, my penis pump. I'll put some pressure to the coolant system and see if I can get that to leak a little bit more. Put 14 pounds to it, and it is definitely leaking more now, 100%. It's dripping. So that is definitely our culprit. Oh yeah, you can see it, that side right there, that's where it is. Rip it out, clean that up, throw in a new freeze plug. Time to drain all the coolant out and make a mess of the garage, and then try to figure out how the hell to get that thing out of there in one piece. I usually just have a little drain pan. I went out and bought a tote, just because the little drain pan I use for oil sometimes isn't wide enough, and I always hate when I make a mess. So we're gonna let it flow at its rate. It's probably gonna take a little while, but we'll let it do its thing. And man, I gotta figure out how to get that freeze plug out of the block. There's a couple different ways. I might throw some grease on it, on the end of it, sorry, not on it, on the end of a drill bit. Drill it out slowly with a bit, put a screwdriver in there and pop it. But I'm gonna try to hit the corner of it first to see if I can get it to swivel. Oh yeah, she's flowing real good. And I'm only really draining what's in the radiator because the car's up at an angle. So the lowest point is gonna be the back of the block. So I know as soon as I pop that freeze plug, that thing's gonna piss everywhere too. I've been working on this thing all day. I gave it a break for a little while. I had to go pick up Ralph from the vet. He had a little surgery today. I had to go get my hair cut done. And then I came back outside to get another wrap at it. Thing would just not budge. So I grabbed my MAP gas torch and I let that thing get hot. Just kept going hot, 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 hot. Got it glowing. A buddy of mine said, try spraying it with penetrating oil afterwards. So I did that. Tried to hit it again, nothing, would not budge. Starting to get mad, walked away from it, text my buddy, dude, this thing will not budge. Take an old swig of the old Bud Light, go back, light that thing up again with a torch, just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Got it nice and cherry red. Took a nice cold spring water that I had in the beer fridge, blasted it with that, shrunk just enough. I was able to get it out, as you can see right here, where I was banging it. I ended up using a very small punch, and that was just enough to rotate it in. It fell in. I was able to catch it, grab it with a pair of pliers, and rip it back out. As you can see, though, this thing was really trashed. When I went to, put it on the edge here to kind of swivel it out like everyone else does, it just blew this whole portion right out. And you can see, I mean, here's a new one. This is probably why they're junk right there. Look at how thick that is, the walls there, compared to what's left on that one. There's really nothing left to it. It's so, deteriorated and worn away. So I grabbed some red RTV sealer for it. We're gonna grab I think it was like an inch and an eighth. Should fit in there nice and good. Tap it back in the block. I was gonna go with the rubber one, but I think I'm gonna go against it because I'm gonna put the silicone on it and I'm just gonna put the regular one back in. We got the new master here. I mean, I bought it off of Amazon. They look the same to me. So we'll find out in a little bit when we put it back together and bleed it. I bought a bench bleeding kit for it. I'll bench bleed that first, hook it back up. I'm gonna do the old hack way. I'm gonna bench bleed it, then screw the lines back in, pump the brakes a bunch, and I'm gonna bleed it right at the lines. Complete change of plans. I put 2 regular Dorman freeze plugs in. The first one went in super loose, and the second one went in not good. And I thought it was in good. I put some pressure to it, it held, and then all of a sudden I went to go tap it in a little bit more, and it just did the old spin. So we're gonna send it with this rubber one. And this winter, I mean, it's August this weekend, so by the end of November, maybe the end of October, I'm pulling the 327 out of this car, and I'm gonna go through it. So we'll just take care of it all then. As long as this works temporarily to get me some rat rod shows, I'm all for it. So let's throw this thing in there, and let's get this car back together. The thing I'm worried about is when I tighten this nut, I put red Loctite on here, that the threads come out. I'll just have to cut them, and hopefully that this thing doesn't fall on the block when they fix it, but we'll figure that out when we get to that road. What's in there, I marked the little nut. The instructions say 2 to 3 times to make it tight. I just did 3 turns, that way I knew kind of where it started. I put some pressure to it, see if it holds. My cap is 16 PSI, so if it holds that, and it clears the engine mount, send time. Right after one, the motor is fully bolted back in. The only thing I have to do is I found this bolt from the engine mount chilling, so I got to figure out how to get that back in there. Fill her back up with fluid, or engine coolant I should say, and bench bleed the new master cylinder, as well as attach the brake booster and pedal back together. That's usually a 2-man job. Now let's see if I can attempt to do it myself tonight. Bleeding's definitely going to be a 2-person job. Just topped off the coolant. It's bubbling naturally. I haven't fired the car back up yet. Just put the brake master cylinder back in. It's brand new. Got it off of Amazon, AC Delco brand. I put the old cap back on because the one that they sent me got bent in shipping, and it was fucking pissing out, leaking, which is really annoying. The car's back down on the ground now. The coolant is filled up. I let it naturally bubble down. We have to top it back off now that the car's back down on the ground. Gotta get Grace out here, help me pump the cylinder to bleed the master cylinder. I did not change the power steering pump, the actual pressure line yet. Do that probably tomorrow. But I also want to get the car back in the air, completely up on those wood blocks that I have, which gets it 2 feet off the air, and see if I can do something about the exhaust, weld something up. So I got that car show, Milltown, on Saturday. Today is Saturday night, so it's a week from today. It's running. We bled the brakes. We did it the kind of half-ass way. When you change the master, I don't know if you guys do it that way, but I learned back in the old day. Throw that in there, fill it up, bench bleed it. These are already all bled with fluid because they don't really leak. I just pumped it a bunch and bled it right here with a rag underneath it. Call it a day for that. The brakes work just fine, so we're going to send it there. Right now I'm trying to let it get up to temperature to let that bubble down and bleed a little bit and top off that coolant. A friend of mine said that I should have a 12 PSI cap. I run a 16, whatever you want to call it. So it has a 16-pound cap on it now. My buddy said I should do a 12 and utilize the overflow. So I'm going to do typical rat rod, overflow as maybe a Jack Daniels bottle or old glass bottle or something. I don't know if you can tell, but you can hear somewhat of a knock. I'm not sure what that is. I'm hoping it's nothing internal. Maybe a wrist pin, maybe it's a worn out cam lobe or something. Not really too sure. But, so on a side note, my friend has a 350, sorry, I'm moving around a little bit, and he wants short money for the short block. It's an 85 4-bolt main from pickup truck. It's 185 horsepower. Not much different than the 327 that's in there, power back heads. So I'm going to grab the short block from him, and then take it apart, bring it to the local machine shop, have them go through it, just check everything, check the clearances, see if it's good to go. Maybe a 30 overbore, so it's a 355. And then I kind of have a line on some Vortec heads, or a line on some World Product SR Torque heads. Stock replacement. I think they're 305 heads. A little bit more compression, whatever. But do that with a little bit of a cam, because I feel like she's got to have somewhat of a cam, a little bit of lope to it, especially with the cutouts, you know what I mean? Make it quiet going down the road, but then a little bit of lope. And then really seal it up good. My Corvette doesn't leak. And the LS motors, I love them because of the way that the gaskets are set up, the way that the lifters and rollers roller lifters, roller rockers, like all that stuff from the factory. It's everything that Generation 1 small blocks turned into, right? The 350 setup to where it's like, you know, 300, 350 horsepower, which I don't think with Vortec heads and a little bit of a cam is going to be hard to do. Even if it's 300 horsepower, I don't care. Fresh 300 horsepower. It's 327, it runs good, probably run forever, but it's tired. It's definitely tired, like, you can tell. So, get a new motor in there, freshen it up, send it right down the road. I'm gonna get this coolant burped, and it's ready to go, hopefully. We'll take it for a test run tomorrow, drive around a little bit, see if that freeze plug holds, make sure we don't got any leaks tonight. We'll take it up to temperature, put some cardboard on the refit, and we'll go from there. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you next time. Later. I mean, after all, this is America, right?